Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to another STEM Racing Poland webinar. Today we are talking about branding, and I'm joined by Peter Russell from Off the Track podcast. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Victor. Thanks for having me on this podcast. Webinar.
Yeah, why not? Do you want to introduce yourself? Say your history with F1 in school, STEM racing, kind of why you've come here to talk about branding.
Sure. So my name's Peter Russell. I am, at the moment, you've probably known from Off the Track, but I was a competitor in F1 in schools, now STEM racing. I competed back in 2016 at the World Finals as part of Infinitude, which you may know as the world record holder in the competition. And I was the graphic designer of that team, but I'm now working in a school, and I'm now running the competition within that school. I've got a few teams there competing in the competition. So yeah, that's my experience with the competition.
All right, and now, so you were the graphic designer and you were in charge of the branding of this team.
Correct. Yeah, that was my role. So yeah, developing the brand, putting it into executing that brand, putting it onto all of our elements, onto the pit display, onto our social media, that kind of stuff, our documents, our portfolios. That was my role.
All right, perfect. Well, we'll get around to later why that's important and how it looks like on a scorecard. But we'll start off with a very broad topic of what is a brand? What is branding, especially maybe in the context of STEM racing?
Sure. So I think a lot of new teams to the competition, they think, oh, brand, and they immediately go, oh, that's a logo. But a brand is just so much more than just a logo. It's what sets you apart from other teams. And it's something you're going to want to spend a bit of time creating. Is more often than not, your brand's going to be the first thing that other people see about your team, and it's your first impression people have of your team. So it's not just the logo; it's your fonts, your stylistic elements you kind of use with your brand, the colors that make up your brand, including your logo. So that is effectively what a brand is.
All right, and for especially a new team or any team trying to improve their brand, how would you recommend creating a brand, kind of creating this STEM racing brand?
Yeah, so for STEM racing teams, they're going to want to start by sort of brainstorming their key values. What does their team stand for? What do they represent? What do they want to be known for? Then they can begin brainstorming what they want their logo to look like. So I'm going to use an example from my team, which was Infinitude. So naturally, in our name, we had kind of infinitude. So infinity, we used an infinity symbol. And then we had two parts symbolizing the two sides of our collaboration team coming together and unifying into a infinity symbol. So that was creating the logo. So that's what teams can start off by doing. Then they can also look at colors for their brand and also color psychology. So, every color has a sort of psychological effect and an effect on us. One good example I will give is yellow, the color yellow. That's a very attention-grabbing color. It's very, very vibrant. That's the reason you see it used on signage and kind of warning signs. So that's yellow. But that applies to every color out there. It does have an effect on us. So choosing your color is important. Another important choice you'll have to make is your fonts. You want to look into sans serif fonts as well as serif fonts. There's differences there. And those are all a good starting point in creating your brands.
So your team started with a team name and kind of expanded outwards.
Correct. We brainstormed, I think it must have been, I'd say a dozen, maybe more, maybe 20 names. But we all sat down together. We actually flew in, I remember. So we had two sides of the team, one from Adelaide. So 3 team members from Adelaide, 3 team members from Melbourne. The Melbourne side, we all flew down to Adelaide for our first kind of in-person meeting. And that was the first point on the agenda, was to kind of figure out, all right, what is our team name going to be? We wrote down, 20 names on a whiteboard, and we went, okay, which one's best? Which one represents us best? Well, Infinitude, that's what we came up with, because it is, we're unifying each other. We're 2 sides coming together. And our kind of motto was one team, infinite possibilities, to build on that name. So yeah, that was the first thing we did. And that was a very, very collaborative thing as well. This is something, it's a collaborative process. You don't want to do this, or you don't want to have one team member just doing this by themselves. You want to make sure you are including all team members of your team in the brand conception process, because at the end of the day, your team is going to be using this brand, whether it's on the car, your pit display, your uniforms, your your team is your brand and your brand is your team. So you want to make sure they're included as part of that process.
Makes sense. That's a great way of putting it. So in your experience, I imagine it's changed. Maybe it's changed a bit since 2016 and since you were competing. But what tools kind of did you use? And since you've kept up with STEM racing and F1 in schools over the past almost a decade now,
Yeah, that's quite horrifying to hear that it's been almost a decade. But yeah, no, you're right. There have been quite a few new tools that have come out, but there's also been some really, really cool tools and that have stuck around for years, maybe even decades, I'd say at this point. Even more than the decade that I've been part of the competition. But one of those decade-old tools are the Adobe Creative Cloud, and teams are going to want to check with their school and maybe their school's IT department or their arts department whether they have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud suite of applications. If you do, you're going to be using those tools all the time. So tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, maybe Premiere Pro if you're going to be editing videos or anything like that for your social media. So primarily Photoshop and Illustrator, you're going to use those for graphic design. You're also going to want to learn InDesign. That's really, really key for creating documents, especially your portfolio, but other documents you might use, such as prospectuses and so on. InDesign has a very, very steep learning curve, so you don't have to kind of use that immediately if you don't want to for your portfolios. I know teams who've used what's it called, PowerPoints and Publisher for their portfolios. It's a good sort of starting point, but if you're progressing to higher levels of the competition, like a national or even a world finals, you're going to want to look at InDesign. So yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool, but it's got a steep learning curve. One piece of software and something that's new within the past decade is Figma, and it's a bit of a collaborative software. You can kind of imagine it like Google Docs, but for Photoshop and Illustrator. So it's very, very good for teams, especially if you're, more than one graphic designer. If you have more than one graphic designer or more than one person working on graphics in your team, it's very, very good for collaborating, especially at the same time on graphics. So I'd look at Figma. And Canva as well. That's been around for a while, but it's always a good tool to use. So those are the tools that I know of. I'm sure there's plenty of other ones out there, but those are kind of the core ones that you'd probably be using.
Now, maybe I'm not sure. I don't think it should be controversially, but I've seen people, and you mentioned using AI for like inspiration, obviously not using it to create your logos, but a lot of inspiration kind of and theory crafting. What's your stand on that? Because I imagine a lot of teams will be doing that, and it's kind of unavoidable. But yeah, what's just your opinion on the matter?
I would say with AI, I think for anything, I think it's a good kind of brainstorming tool. Even for going back to your team name, that's a great way to kind of brainstorm a team name, I think. And the same goes for logos. You can use that as inspiration, definitely, 100%. I don't think professional graphic designers. I wouldn't call myself a professional graphic designer, but I imagine industry graphic designers, they're not kind of working in isolation with no view to the outside world. They will be looking at what's going on in the industry, what other brands are doing, and using that as inspiration. And I think AI is another tool to use as inspiration. So I wouldn't shun AI, but for anything, you shouldn't be using AI as the kind of sole point or the sole creator of your work. You need to have an input on it. Otherwise, there's no point in you being in the team. If AI is going to do it all for you, replace yourself with AI and leave the team. But that's not going to happen. So you've got to, you can use AI 100%. It's there to make our lives easier. That's why it exists. But I wouldn't be using that, as the only tool. But it's 100% a very, very good way of getting inspiration.
Makes sense, especially for a team struggling maybe to get ideas or for the very first iteration and competition, getting the first step kind of into the whole branding process. Makes sense.
Definitely.
So now I think we're going to look at the branding scorecard and talk about, you're going to talk about how branding is assessed, and I'm going to keenly listen.
Yes. So this is the UK competition regulations, but you also use it in Poland, if I'm correct. So these two here, this is actually under the brand identity scorecard. The top 3 criteria are to do with the pit display, which we're not talking about today, but we're going to look at the corporate identity section, which are these 2 criteria. So you're going to be aiming for this top band here, and these descriptors within these bands, we'll just go through them now. So you're going to want to have an excellent and highly effective brand identity, visual brand consistently applied through all project elements with an appropriate team dynamic. And what it means there by an appropriate team dynamic is within your interview. So how is each person contributing? That's also mentioned in the next one, which says excellent and highly effective team name, trademark, and operating style in line with the team's graphic identity. Clear buy-in from all members to a set of established common aims. And that's also something you're going to want to kind of address in your interview. One thing I want to come back to is this one up here, which is about visual brand consistently applied. And one of the main kind of tips I give to every team I'm involved with and mentor is that you're going to want to look at creating a set of brand guidelines. And this is something that almost every brand out there in the industry has. And what a brand guide is it basically lists how to keep your brand consistent, which perfectly addresses this, but it has information on, okay, what variations of your logo are there? What colors does your brand use? The exact hex values, CMYK values. Some brands have Pantone values, which is a way of kind of, ensuring print colors look the same across different printers. What fonts do you use? All of that sort of stuff is documented within a brand guide, but that demonstrates to the judges that you can keep your brand consistent and consistently apply it. And that right there addresses this. So that's the biggest sort of piece of advice I give. You're going to want to print that out, put it on your pit display so that when the judges come around for your branding interview, you can pull that out and go, all right, for our brand, we had brand guidelines and that kept our brand consistent when we applied it through all of our project elements, which is exactly what it says here. And hopefully, if you say exactly what I just said, they should be giving you 20 out of 20.
I'd like to raise excellent and highly effective team name trademark. Those seem pretty straightforward. Like, you thought about your team name, you kind of have some history behind it, like you mentioned with Infinitude. You kind of thought about it. It actually meant something to you guys. Trademark, kind of similar, I imagine, but it's, the logo, it's kind of a lot of visual stuff. But what would you say about operating style in terms of team identity?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because in Australia, we don't have that in our regulations, and it's not even in the World Finance regulations. If I had to guess, and I'm having to guess because I don't have a lot of experience with this criteria written in this way, operating style, I reckon that would be probably from the interview. You'd discern that. I don't know how you'd discern that in any other way. But one thing you could draw from that is some brands have have tone of voice guidelines, and what that is kind of it kind of documents the way in which your brand writes, which I think for a STEM racing team might be a bit overkill. But your tone of voice is quite important when it comes to branding, because the way that you speak, particularly in a written way, elicits different emotions from people. A good example is if you're writing in all caps, it sounds like you're shouting. And if you're using very emotive language, then your reader's going to be quite emotional. That could be what they mean by operating style, but I assume that's more from the interview, if I had to guess.
Makes sense. So when you're kind of getting your pit display interview and your corporate identity interview, you're all on the same page. You all understand kind of what your brand is, what you are physically representing, and everybody kind of is just on the same page, basically.
100%. And one thing I'd say as well, it says here clear buy-in from all members. Now, all members is not just the enterprise members of your team. It's not just the team manager, the graphic designer, and the marketing manager. It's everyone, including the engineers. So just because your engineers aren't really involved with your team's identity, well, they are to some extent, because they should have been involved with the conception process of your brand. So one thing everyone needs to do is speak in that interview, because if not everyone's speaking, then you don't really have a clear buy-in from all members. And you need to kind of establish those common aims, as it says. And yeah, everyone needs to speak so that judges get the idea that, okay, everyone's contributing here to your brand.
So if you had a final piece of advice of if people were in the, or if a team was in the kind of middle bracket in the 5 to 11 points, what would be your biggest piece of advice to get them out from the 5 to 11 into the 12 and up to 20, hopefully, bracket?
Yeah. So the biggest sort of thing, and this goes for any kind of any criteria really, is to look at kind of the language that is being used in the top band, so in the descriptor. And if I'm comparing the middle brand and the top brand, consistency is in both, so that's fine. If you have a brand guide, as I said earlier, that really shows that you're applying it through all project elements, as it says. So you're going to want to make sure here it doesn't say all project elements. So if you haven't applied it consistently across all project elements, you're going to be in the middle brand. What you need to be doing is applying it across all project elements. So if you're not using the same fonts across everything, if your logos look different, between your car and your uniform and your pit display, it's very, very hard for the judges to move you up to this top band. And the big thing that's missing is also an appropriate team dynamic. So maybe you aren't demonstrating, your team dynamic within your interview. Maybe you're not kind of, if someone doesn't know the answer, you're not handing that off correctly, or maybe not everyone's speaking. That's something you need to be aware of. Same in this one, clear buy-in from all members. This sort of phrase here isn't evident in the middle bracket. So the same thing goes for this criteria as well. You want to make sure all your members are speaking. I'm just trying to look what else there is. Yeah, excellent and highly effective. Again, it's a bit subjective. How can you sort of quantify excellence? But the biggest kind of thing is, if your brand is not consistent, it looks sloppy. Think of any major brand out there. Look at Apple, for example. They've got a very consistent style. If Apple starts doing something wacky and completely, that isn't in their branding, people are going to go, what's going on? That's not Apple. That's not Apple at all. That's not their brand. They might be someone else, for all we know what's going on. So having a really, really consistent brand is the number one priority. So yeah, that's probably the biggest tip I can give.
Makes sense. Obviously, you can't write their portfolios for them. You can't design the brands for them, but a good piece of advice goes a long way.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think we got a question on Instagram. We got a poll, and a bit of a cheeky question, I might say, but it makes sense considering the circumstances. Is what are your opinions on the STEM Racing brand? We could say STEM Racing Poland here, but because we have the logo in the corner of the screen, but the STEM Racing brand as a whole, I know you've obviously looked at it a fair bit. You work in the space. We could use it as a kind of a case study, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say the STEM Racing brand is very, very good. I like the new, or the use of gradients. I think it's really, really punchy. It's very, very vibrant, very modern as well. Like you can see in the background here behind us. But yeah, and I don't know if people know, they might not know that all of these gradients are based on CFD and kind of the patterns that come out of the results of that. I think they're very, very vibrant. They've kind of kept the same kind of fonts. It's that same kind of slanted fonts representing forward motion. So yeah, no, I do like it. Obviously, it's very, very early in the stages of the brand. It's only just come out. What are we, May now? So it's only been around for about 5 months. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see how it grows. But I do like it. It's very, very modern, very, very fresh, and definitely excited to see how it matures. But yeah, no, it's good. Everything kind of seems consistent, which you want in a brand. And also the other thing is, the brand kind of, the logo is also used as a branding element. So you might have seen on a few, I don't know, probably posts maybe on various STEM Racing accounts where they've used that logo as a stylistic element in the brand. I think that works quite well. And what they've written in the brand guidelines is that the SR also symbolizes a track shape. And I think that's what they're called, actually. There's other track shapes. So yeah, it all links back, and they've got their values. which is that they're in motorsport or motorsport education and STEM education. And it's it's in the name, STEM, and it's racing. So they've got the track, and it all links in, and it's all very, very nice. So I quite like it.
I'd say it's a very consistent. There's a nice variety. I'm waiting for the uniforms to be revealed. That'll be a very big part of if it's all consistent,
And the other thing I'm waiting for to be revealed is the new trophy, because obviously the old World Champions trophy was the F1 logo, but what is it going to look like this year at the World Finals? We'll have to wait and find out.
I think I'll have to go to HQ myself. I'll have to go interview everybody, see if everyone's on brand or on the same page about the branding, see if they're consistent among the whole team.
Definitely.
But I think that just about wraps it up. I appreciate the little case study, because you can kind of see with the STEM Racing logo, there's the racetrack, there's the SR. It's not just random decisions. These are all kind of a brand, and that's exactly what this is about.
Exactly.
So thank you for your time. Where would you like to direct people after this? Do you want to plug your podcast, your own, anything else?
Sure.
Your own?
Sure. You can. There's more advice on the Off the Track YouTube channel, and also offthetrack.net. We've got resources up on there as well. And there's tons of content. Great for new teams. And it's good watch, I would say, but I'm a bit biased. So
I very much do recommend it for anyone watching, especially if you're in STEM Racing Poland participant. I know a lot of the teams are kind of it's their first time competing in this. We've not been around that long, so Off the Track really do have a lot of useful resources. But thank you for your time. Thank you for all your advice and wisdom information.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully that was helpful.
No problem. I think it was, but thank you.
No worries.
We'll see you all at the next webinar.